Hello, and welcome. I am so excited to be here with Yorona Boster. Welcome, Yorona.
It's nice to be here.
I woke up this morning and I went to check my Amazon list, and lo and behold, your book, #1 bestseller on Amazon, first thing this morning. And so that's what you and I are here about. You're like, I emailed you, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know. So, welcome to launch day. This is how it goes. This is how it feels. How are you feeling?
I am feeling excited, nervous, overwhelmed, worried, all the things that I can feel I am feeling. So.
All the really, really good things. All right, before we jump on in to these wonderful questions I want to ask you about your book, I want to just give a brief intro to the people who are joining us here. I'm speaking with Yorona Boster, and she is the author of the #1 bestseller, Unspoken Signals, Essential Parenting Skills to Raise Emotionally Secure Children. So it's a book about raising a happy and healthy human, and how it really isn't easy. Now, I come on board as your book coach. We're going to talk about that later. First, I want to talk just briefly how you and I met, because you have so many more things to you than you just have a lot of things to you. You're not just a parenting expert. You're this and this and this, which really adds to the depth of what you bring in this book. So you have spent years as an advanced certified life coach, certified speaker coach, TEDx speaker, TEDx event moderator, and you've had 2 decades in early childhood education in human development, psychology, and coaching. You co-host a podcast and Messages for World Stages, and your TEDx talk explores parenting and foundational loss shaped by your experiences, and you empower people to lead and connect with empathy, resilience, and purpose through transformative communication. I feel like that's the legal part that I have to get out of the way and say, right? All those wonderful things. So if you want more, go check out her Amazon author page, her bio, go check out. Yorona, who are you and why do you do what you do?
I'm a human, not an AI. So that's like first and foremost. And I guess that in this day and age, I would say the most important thing for me to come into anyone's life with is I'm a connector. I love connection, the human to human connection. As a species, we're conditioned for connection. We seem to be losing that. And that frightens me. It worries me for the sake of our momentum as a civilization and a species.
Mm-hmm. So is this why you wrote this book now?
Yeah, well, I wrote this book because I kept seeing parents over so many years trying so hard, but feeling like they were failing anyway. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to give them a different lens. The world is so loud, it's so fast, it's so full of pressure, and parents need a place to breathe. They need a place to reflect and reconnect with themselves first. And I think I really wanted to normalize the messiness of parenting, because it is messy, and yet show people that growth, it doesn't require us to be perfect. It requires us to be simply present. So I guess this book is my way of saying, you're not alone. You are not broken. You're human.
I love that part, not broken and not alone. Because sometimes parents, as a parent myself, goodness, something would happen and what do I do about this? Where do I go? How do I connect? Where do I find the answers that I want to find to better understand myself, to help my little human who's growing up? How did you come up with the title Unspoken Signals? And does that have anything to do with not being alone and your overall purpose of writing the book?
Unspoken Signals comes from the fact that I dove really deep into communication. After I left my traditional job and I moved into the world of entrepreneurship, I realized there was an ingredient that people kept missing. Mm-hmm. And it brought me back to this thing that my mom used to say. When she would get frustrated with my father, she would say, well, he should just know. He should just know what I want. And I thought about it and I was like, what is that saying? What is that really communicating? And I realized that communication was the answer.
Yeah.
And unspoken signals is my recognition of the fact that as a human being, we believe we communicate all the things we have inside of us to the best of our ability through the intention we have. When the reality is, intention is not what drives our communication. Communication is a learned behavioral skill. So whatever you're learning in the environment you were raised in and in the environments you move through and the influences that shape your lives as you move forward, those are the ways that you communicate. And I realized that, well, if intention drove our parenting, we would have a perfect world.
Right.
Entirely different. And yet that's not the case. So I wanted people to understand, especially parents to understand, that it's the unspoken signals that our children pick up on the most. It's the unspoken aspects of communication that drive meaning and understanding and perception and reception for our children.
And parents may not be aware of that extra layer, that extra dimension of those unspoken signals that they're putting out to their children.
Yeah. Rarely are they. In fact, most of the time, only in reflection are we aware of what our parents communicated to us and that we want to do something different. But it's hindsight. So my hope is that my book gives people a little bit of an opportunity for some foresight.
Just before we went live on air, we were talking about how you have a desire to be the Mr. Rogers for parents. Mr. Rogers creates this space where I don't care whether you're a little one or a grown adult child or whoever you are. I just love Mr. Rogers. Why do you want to be the Mr. Rogers for parents, and what does all of that entail?
Mr. Rogers had this essence to him that was calm. It was centered. It was so present with the people he was with, especially for the children. And I think in this day and age, we are so lost to past failures, worries, experiences, traumas, or fears, anxieties over future, that we're rarely staying present in what we do with our children. And I want to give parents a space where they can be fully present with themselves so that they can learn how to be fully present with their children.
That just gives me goosebumps. They're not in the past about something that happened. They're not in the future about what do we have to do, go, say, look like, all of that. But they're just present and experiencing one another and focusing on that communication. That's beautiful. How does this book connect with your larger vision?
Well, my big vision is to help people communicate with more clarity, with more compassion, with more self-awareness, especially within their families, but also because I see parents as leaders. Everything I do communicates not just in parenting roles, but in any leadership role. And the reality is that because parenting is so personal, it is one of the most profound spaces that I like to say this, it's one of the most profound communication laboratories we ever enter.
Ooh, curiosity enters the scene.
Yeah.
Try this, try that, learn, establish an hypothesis, test the hypothesis. I love that.
Yeah. And so I guess this book is a part of my larger work of helping people really understand themselves with that curiosity and exploration, that opportunity for curiosity and exploration that, we get as children, but somehow we lose as adults.
We do.
We're told, just be an adult, be responsible, be perfect, be successful, be accomplished. And and the reality is, I firmly believe that we can show up differently for both the people we love and the people we care for and the people who surround us every day in our everyday lives. We can show up differently. There's always opportunity for change. In fact, one of my things with my larger mission is to get people to understand that age-old adage, oh, a person never really changes, is so wrong.
They can change if they want.
In fact, it's the fallacy of living, because change is the only thing that is inevitable in life.
Yeah. You just gave me goosebumps with that. You did. And earlier, you were talking about people stop believing. One of my favorite movies is Peter Pan, and Tinkerbell has the fairy dust that she sprinkles, and people, if you sprinkle the dust, it was just a medium for the, you can believe and you can fly.
Yeah.
And then you can, be successful. So you mentioned success a minute ago. What does success look like? How would you define success as a parent, a creator, a human being?
Mm. Success is not a singular moment. It's a mindset shift and an ongoing evolutionary process. It is the ability to look at who you were yesterday, and see even a small shift towards growth and progress. I think we get caught up in this space of comparing ourselves to others. Oh, I'm not as successful as that person. But that is the biggest disservice we can do to ourselves. I had a TEDx client who I love to quote because I think this was one of my favorite lines ever, which is that stop comparing ourselves to others and start comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday.
I like that.
Because we can see small shifts and small changes if we choose to see them in ourselves. And to me, it means that success is staying curious instead of being rigid. It's being open to learning instead of defensive of our preconceived beliefs and perceptions. And it's being present instead of worrying about being perfect. So many people worry about saying the perfect thing. And my husband and I were having this conversation the other day. He said to me, sometimes I just worry I'm going to say the wrong thing. So I just shut up and I don't say anything at all. He was speaking in relationship to our son. He's so worried about saying the wrong thing that he won't say anything. And that's more problematic than he realizes. And we have this conversation about it because he wants to get the right words out, the perfect words, but it's not about that. If you're present, then even when the wrong words come out, you can say, you know what, I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to say this wrong, but here's what I want to try to say. Here's what I mean by what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And you're communicating, which is the essence of your book.
Yes.
So as I'm listening to this, I'm realizing that you've distilled your book down into parenting, but there's greater lessons out there for communication and just that human aspect of communication.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it's not black and white. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's doing your best to communicate in a way that is meaningful and matches you.
Yeah. It's saying, I'm still here, I'm still trying, and I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm. Has that philosophy changed in parenting over the years? Didn't it used to be right, wrong, quiet, don't speak unless you're spoken to, right?
Yes, very much so. And a
So,
big part of it, even with kids, even with parents telling their child, act like an adult,
yeah.
but they don't know
How?
right? They're not learning, they're just doing.
Yeah.
It's the move from authoritarian model to, well, we've moved all over the place, in all honesty. We moved from authoritarian to permissive to fear-based parenting to now we've got gentle parenting, and there's so many, and helicopter parenting and bulldozer parenting, and oh goodness, there's so many different versions and spaces and places of different parenting. It's not about trying to model yourself after one parenting methodology. It's about finding the balance. It's about finding the balance that works for you and your unique child. Because here's the thing, even if you have 5 children, each of them is going to experience you differently, and you're going to experience each child differently. And that's because we're unique humans. So really, it's about finding the best strategies that work for you and that child. for your parent or for your spouse or your partner and that child. For that, it's mixing and matching in a lot of ways, and it's being fluid enough to understand that it's all a growth and learning process. And rather than beating ourselves up for the mistakes we make, we can own the mistakes and move towards trying to do better.
And it's more of a collaboration with the parent and the child.
Yes.
My children are grown, and I just got back from visiting a son of mine in Denver, where we had a book launch, and then another son in Arizona. The two boys could not be more different. One is a doctoral program, the other one is a creative. And it wasn't anything I did. It was who they are, who they were at their core, in me trying my best to not extinguish the flame of you have to be this way or you have to be this way, but more feeding the fuel of this is who you are.
Yes, that's a huge part of my book. A huge part of my book is understanding what autonomy truly means, and understanding self-agency, and understanding how you can meet that with and for your child at the same time as you meet that with and for yourself. Because one thing that's in my book that, you said before that people can learn a lot from it, even if they're not a parent. And what's really funny is I've had a number of people read the book who are not parents, and they said, this is actually a book for humanity. This is a book for people to understand people, to understand themselves and how they function in the world. And it reshaped, yes, I'm coming at it through a parenting lens, but I want people to understand that there are certain foundational elements to being human that once we understand them, we can grow from them and with them.
Yeah. And you just said, once we understand them, as your book coach, you and I worked through. Mm-hmm. So I know that a lot of your book has reflection in it, reflection with your parents and the important relationships in your life. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot from my parents, who were very perfectly imperfect humans. Mm-hmm. I realized that my parents wanted to be different, but they didn't have the tools to know how. And I think I wanted to understand that better. What kind of sent me down this path was, one, the professional side of things in my life, but two was the personal side of my experience with my parents. They taught me a lot. They taught me a lot about who I don't want to be, but they also taught me a lot about who I do want to be. And I was trying to figure out how to measure that, because one of the things I've seen is so many people who will try to run in the opposite direction of their parents. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we're not learning from them. We're trying to avoid everything about them. When we actually opt in to reflect on our parentage, on how we were parented and the generational knowledge that we picked up and received, because it's never just about our parents, it's about the generations that came before them and before them and before them. We start to see that there's so much learning to be had. We start to understand that it wasn't about their mistakes. It was actually about their attempts at trying, and it was also about the mistakes. It was both, and it can be all of the things. Something I tell people all the time is that you could have 1,000 people on a train, and that train derails, and you'll have 1,000 different perspectives on what occurred. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to say is that any given experience we have, whether that's the experience with our parents or the other experiences that we have through our lives, have a multitude of different perspectives. If we turn that one experience we had where our parent was screaming at us for XYZ, and we just turn it just slightly, instead of that fear and that anger and that frustration that we had with our parents and that belittlement and all of those things, we can turn it just slightly and see, oh, this was the communication style they learned from their parents. Yeah. My mother learned that from her parents. They were extremely mentally and emotionally abusive. And one of the things she would say in her most logical moments was, I don't want to be my parents. But yet, when there are moments of stress, when there are moments of heightened emotional situations, what happened? She fell back on what she knew. And she, in fact, did become her parents in those moments. And it was almost like she'd completely disconnect from the logical part of her brain that knew she didn't want to be doing that and just behave that way. Because, as I said, it's a behavioral pattern that we pick up. So if we pick up a behavioral pattern, the great news is we can learn a new behavioral pattern.
Because we're aware of it. There have been times when I was raising my children, something would happen. I go, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Right? My mother was an arm grabber, and I worked hard to not take a child by the arm. You know what I mean? Because I didn't like it. She was also always used a washcloth on faces, which I don't like. So there can be harmful patterns and gross patterns and positive patterns. But I'm hearing you say that ability to understand why your parents and their parents had even that epigenetic background.
Exactly.
Pulls that cellular imprint on in maybe trauma or things like that, creates the parents we had, that creates who we are, that's helping us with our little human beings that we have.
Exactly.
So understanding that trail is really important. So when your reader is like, something happens and you're like, why did I do that? Where did that come from? Or, oh, I'm just like my parents. I don't want to be like my parents. I want to be like my parents. This book gives the reader that understanding.
You know what's really interesting? Something that you just said, why did I do that? I didn't want to do that, is a judgment call. Instead of, I wonder what it was that made me do that. And there's a slight distinction there, because the what it is gives you curiosity to understand it. Why is the judgment call of, I shouldn't have done that? But all it does is it puts you into a place of shame and blame and guilt.
That's right again, right, wrong, rather than the curiosity. Why did I do that?
What was it that caused me to do that thing? And it's that understanding, right?
I love it.
Very important. However, there's another piece to this puzzle. Awareness and understanding gets you only so far. The next piece to the puzzle is practice. If we want to do anything differently, we have to practice at doing it differently. And we have to practice at doing it differently when we have all of our faculties engaged. What I like to say is when the stakes are low. You know, you don't have a concert pianist go out and do a concert for the first time, never having had practiced any piano time. No, they put a lot of dedication into practice, practice, practice when nobody's around, when their tutors around, when their trainers around, but they do so much practice. And that's because they can practice creating a habitual pathway, a neuroplastic pathway in their brain that sets them on a habitual path of a different pattern. It's the same thing with parenting. So the practice of taking a breath before we respond, you need to do that in general. Take a breath before I respond, even when there's not a pressure situation going on. And especially when there's not a pressure situation, because then when there is a pressure situation going on, guess what? Your training that you trained yourself in the new habitual pattern is going to kick in.
Pause. Yeah. Take a pause.
Exactly.
That sounds like another part of another book for you. Take a pause. Yeah. So presence, curiosity. You want to talk about how those all influence parenting in your book?
So presence is what allows us to actually see our children instead of projecting onto them. We start to see them for who they truly are and not for who we wish them to be. Awe is this beautiful state of wonder and curiosity at the same time. And awe softens us. And it reminds us that this whole experience that we're having is so much bigger than the day-to-day frustrations and stressors. And curiosity in and of itself, it really keeps us from collapsing into the old patterns, and then opens that door, as I said before, to connection and growth. When we're curious about what's going on instead of why did you do that behavior, when we're mad and frustrated with our kid for throwing the remote at the TV and breaking the TV, and we're so angry about it, curiosity allows us to take a step back and evaluate what's happening here.
And that perspective is what helps us just see, feel, hear, become aware of those unspoken signals.
Yes.
So we've talked about why you wanted to write the book. Let's talk about the book itself. Do you have a favorite part that just really hits your heart, that if you say read one chapter, this is it?
I think it was more the specific moments, the moments where I shared my own struggles.
Yeah.
Because those felt like the most honest and connective parts. Yeah, I'm going to readily admit, and I admit this all the time to my parent clients, my coaching clients and everything, I am no perfect parent, but I try to be as in it as I can and be as present as I can be and as often as I can be. I don't get it 100%, right? But my father used to say, the trying is the most important part. It's more important than the winning. And so the chapters that I think meant the most to me were the ones where I was able to really revisit my own patterns, my own mistakes, the ones that I still struggle with and that I continue to work on diligently every day. And writing about my own growth, it required the vulnerability and transparency that I like to step into everything with anyway. I'm more than happy to be transparent with people about what I do know and what I don't know. And I think that helps create a really comfortable space. I will say, if I had to pick any chapters that were probably the hardest emotionally for me, it would be the two chapters that I really focused on loss. The very last chapter, loss and legacy, and now I'm blanking on the number of the chapter that it was. I think it was 4, where I talk about the moment that my sister and I were on the phone, and my sister said to me, "Yorona, do you realize we're orphans now?"
Yeah.
And it kind of swept over me like, oh, wow, yeah, our parents are no longer here, and they certainly went a lot earlier than I ever, I think, I don't know about you, but I know people who've lost their loved ones in the ages of 90s and still heartbreak over that, because that loss is one of the most difficult losses to come to understanding with. But those were probably the most emotionally difficult, and are going to be the most emotionally difficult, I know, for many people reading it, because loss tends to make people extremely uncomfortable. But I hope that I do it justice, and that I offer a comforting space when they read it.
You do. I can attest that you do. You're a beautiful writer. You're a beautiful thinker. I was not a ghostwriter for you. I was your book coach. So the next question I have for you is, everyone that we write a book with has a transformation throughout the book. They start a book thinking, this is the book I'm going to write about. And by the time they get to the end, it's taken on a life of its own. Did you start your book with one intention in mind for your reader, and then how did it evolve?
I started it with this idea that I would give parents an opportunity to really understand the growth and development of children,
right,
and what that looks like.
And that's your background.
I came at it from a little bit more of a clinical place and space, and then I realized that I couldn't do it justice with that in mind. Right. I wasn't teaching in this book. I was opening doors of possibility, and that kind of hit me hard. And the reason I came to you when I was about a third of the way through the book is because I hit a wall in that moment when I realized that. I was like, oh, I need to do this justice. I need to walk this path to do justice to the parents who are going to pick it up and read it. And how do I do that with an acknowledgement that humans are so diverse and so unique? And then I also started getting so much advice from so many people. And I'm one of those people who has a very hard time with decision making that I still struggle with, because I see all possibility. So it's hard for me to see the black and white of like, let me just make a decision and go with it. So I think, yeah, it was such a magnificently uncomfortable growth process. And I say that in a good way. I find growth and expansion, I find growth to be this expansive process. But in growth, we are uncomfortable. There's a reason why we call it growing pains. There's, because there's so much discomfort, because you're learning something new, because you're a beginner, because you don't know what on earth you don't know. And you don't know what you're doing. And so when you have a partner, when you create and find a partnership in that with somebody like yourself, who's able to actually offer that space to find that beautiful partnership without judgment, that's when I learned, oh, okay, I can do this. I just need the proper support mechanisms to do so.
Well, and as a parenting coach,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a space where you offer a safe space for people to arrive, unpack, be themselves, and process. Yes.
Yeah, yes. And we don't walk through, we think we're supposed to walk through life alone when we get to a certain age. We think at that point, I should know how to do this. But the reality is, I call it scaffolding. We all need scaffolding. Scaffolding is not a permanent fixture. It's not a permanent structure. In my book, you'll read about this from a parenting perspective, where we create these supports that then can start to be removed as that person navigates that thing with a little bit more competency. And then they move to another place where new scaffolding is needed. Adults need scaffolding too. We need this just as much as anybody else. But yet, because of the culture, the corporate culture we've created, the academic structural cultures we've created, and the spaces we've created, there is this attitude of you no longer need the support, you can fly on your own. When the reality is, you may be able to fly for a time because now you know that path really well, but then you come to a new path. And now you need new scaffolding. Now you need new structure, new support mechanisms. And at each growth stage, because as I said before, change is inevitable, that change that comes, you're going to say, oh, this is something new. Like when parents are now parenting their adult children. My partner and I, so my podcast, The Evolution of Parenting, we just finished recording season 3, part 2, where we talk about parents of adult children, the dark side of that fence, and how difficult that is, and the repair that's needed, and so much of the fracturing that's going on in those relationships, and why is that, and all this stuff. And one of the things that we come to is that realization, well, it's a new stage, it's a new chapter. And for any given new chapter, you kind of need to surround yourself by the village. You need some more community support. You need some more guidance, some more assistance in those moments to understand what is new about this and how can I navigate this. So yeah, the book writing process was like that for me, and the same is true of parenting.
Yeah, there's a transformation, evolution, awakening, maturity, curiosity,
Yeah.
presence, all of those words that you've used. It just reminds me, I'm kind of a foodie. It sounds weird. I love to cook. And I love to cook ethnic foods.
Hmm.
And I love that I can go to my pantry and I can pull out these ingredients for an Italian meal, or these ingredients for an Asian meal. And I don't know why that analogy just keeps coming up. Maybe I love the way your book and your approach is so adaptable. If you have a human who is like this, then this is some approaches or some ways to think of things. And if you have a little human being who's like this, because like we talked about before, they're not necessarily blank slates. I'm not sure if that's Piagetian or not, but it's really growing with our child as we learn to parent them.
Yes.
When I was a brand new mom, I remember holding my little one and I'm like, I'm never going to make the same mistakes my parents made. And guess what? I made my whole slew of different mistakes because parenting is not easy. What words of advice would you give to the parent who is struggling and feels alone and that they're doing things wrong? What would you say?
It's okay to own your mistakes. And no matter how alone you may feel, I promise you there are hundreds of tens of millions of thousands of parents feeling exactly the same way you do. When you're willing to reach for the guidance and support in a space where there's no judgment, in a space where it's just you and that support mechanism, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whether that's a counselor, what you're saying is, I believe I can change. I believe I can grow. I believe there's possibility here. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to find a way. I'm not going to do this perfectly, but I'm going to try to do this. And that says that you believe and have hope that there is a better way. Yeah. Because I promise there is always a better way when you're struggling. And I'm going to tell you quite honestly that we just had a struggling moment yesterday with my son. And I had to take a step back and look at it from, because when you're in it, it feels so overwhelming that your system just wants to simply shut down. But when you can take that step back and you could say, okay, I may not know how to approach this, but I know there are people out there who could help me figure that out. That's your moment where you're basically saying there are lifelines. Yep. And they're there for you. And so I will tell every struggling parent, you never struggle alone. You don't have to do this alone. And whether it's me or the countless other incredible parenting coaches and therapists and guidance counselors and so many people out there who are desperate to try to help you, what you're actually doing them is doing them a good thing, because you're giving them the opportunity to do exactly what it is that they find purposeful in their lives. So, give someone an opportunity to help you, because we all want to help each other. I bet you have an expertise in life, and I'm speaking to this struggling parent. I bet you have an expertise in life. And how often do you feel so good about yourself when you help somebody else with that expertise? Here in parenting, you may be struggling and it's not your expertise, and that's okay, because there is somebody out there who could help you with that. And it feels good. It feels good all around when we do that. It feels good for you when you finally have those aha moments with that person helping you, and it feels good to them to be helping you, because that's what our human condition is actually about. We are a very unique species. We are these incredible autonomous creatures living in a communal species. And that means we get to commune with one another and support one another so that we can all build and grow together.
So for those of you who missed everything at the beginning because you just started listening right away, this is an interview with Yorona Boster. Correct. I had to remember it. One is always this one's Yorona Boster, and her book is Unspoken Signals: Essential Parenting Skills to Raise Emotionally Secure Children. It launches today on Amazon, so go buy your copy, help her. She's already at #1 bestseller status, and we want to keep her there and maybe get it in more than one category. Really exciting. So go check out her book, because she is one of those people who walks the talk and is a parenting coach is the real thing with the stories. Okay, let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes writing. Before we
Yes.
do that, though, because then we're going to go into about writing the book, in the technical parts behind that. And you just gave just a passionate, this is what I want my reader to walk away with. Any stories you can share with us of client transformations that you've had with? You did
I
not know
will.
this question was coming.
No, but I will tell you, I've had a lot of clients cry with me. And I think opening that space for people is so magnificent because it's not tears, it's not always tears of sorrow. A lot of times it's tears of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
There are many reasons why we cry, but sometimes it's tears of recognition, tears of awareness, tears of like, oh gosh, I have to change. Oh, this is hard. Sometimes it's tears of vulnerability. And one thing, okay, I've seen so much change from so many people because they have these aha moments for themselves that have nothing to do with what I told them, but with what they came to realize.
Yeah.
And that is a hugely distinctive thing. As a coach, you're not there to advise somebody, do this, do this, do this. You're there to help somebody find the path that works best for them. Being that support mechanism to finding the path doesn't mean you find it for them and tell them exactly how to walk it. It means you help nudge them towards the path, and then their awareness opens up the realization, oh, this is the path. I had an aha moment with one of my clients the other day where she just kind of sat back and was like, oh. And a lot of those moments that happen are not always stuff that they fully verbalize to me. So what I want people to understand is that sometimes they'll tell me a little bit, but what I see is I only see, they communicate the tip of the iceberg, and what I see happening is the entire iceberg shifting inside of them. And those moments are hard to describe, but they are so real, because what happens in that moment is they realize that they have that dawning realization. When that thing shifts inside of them, they suddenly start to walk the path of changing their externalized behavioral patterns to actually accommodate to the new shift. Those moments are critical for people, and they're not always what I expect. They're not, and I shouldn't even say expect, I have no real expectations, but they're not always what I maybe anticipate. They start to realize, oh, I could do this. And I'm like, huh, I didn't think of that. They thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are moments of transformation that simply light me up, because it wasn't me driving it. It was them driving it and me simply giving them the road to drive on. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're magical. They're absolutely magical.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love the moments of like you mentioned, transformation, and that ignition or that internalization from inside,
Yeah.
that change happening.
Yes. Yes. And it's because, so something I like to tell everybody is this regarding communication. This is my personal philosophy. So if you don't agree with me, it's all good. But as a human being, I believe we kind of have 5 essential components to us, and then there's this essence. If you believe in a higher power, that's where you might get your essence from, that core of your humanity. But these 5 essential components are our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs, and our emotions, our feelings, and our behaviors. The only way other people experience us is through our behaviors. Everything else is an internal world. And communication is the behavior by which we show all of these things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The way all of our behaviors are communicative. It's the how we're showing up. It's the externalized way that we show all of these other things. So when we learn how to communicate really well, we can actually show the truth of all of this. The authenticity is, a very popularized word, but I really firmly believe our authentic self that is truly an internal world most of the time can show up through the behavior of communication once we learn how to do it effectively. That's my
And
sense.
to communicate effectively,
Mm-hmm.
internal dialogue we have going on, we have to understand our own unspoken signals.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. Close the loop.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Because if we can't communicate clearly to ourselves, to our children, to our partners, family,
Bosses, subordinates.
all they have is that behavior piece. And then they can interpret that how they want.
And they do.
And they do.
They do always, because they're interpreting it through the lens of their own perceptions and past experiences.
Correct. Oh, that might be my favorite part of this interview. That was my aha moment. Communicating clearly, understanding these first 5 things. So you've got the behavior. I love that. Thank you for all you've done and all you brought. So
Yes.
behind the scenes with everything. What did the actual writing process look like for you? How long did it
Oh
take?
gosh.
How long had you been working on the book? Where did the idea originate?
It was so messy. It was definitely not linear, and it was so deeply human that I had to lean into that. Like I said before, the discomfort of it. Some days the words just poured out of me, and I stayed up till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, just going. And then there were so many other days where I had to coax them. I had to sometimes it was gently coaxing, and sometimes it felt like smashing my head against the wall. It was a process of constantly trying to reroute and return to my own center and my own guidance and lessen the voices of others in my mind. Because as I said before, I'm a person who I love to hear other people's perspectives, but I noticed that other people's perspectives were crowding in, and it wasn't allowing me to stick to what was true for me, what was truly known in the knowledge and the experience and the trainings and all the things that I had, because other people were telling me, well, this would be better, and so on and so forth. And what I realized was, when I was able to actually reroute to my center, I was being less pulled off track. And you helped me with that so graciously, because when I hit that wall about a third of the way through, that's where I was stumbling around, where I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just do something else. Maybe this isn't the right path for me. And and I was questioning everything. And I will tell people this time and time again, no matter how successful a person is, there are always about 1,000,000 different moments of misstep before they got to that success. 1,000,000 different moments of failure, of stumbling blocks, of walls, of moments of insecurity, of moments of severe self-doubt, of moments where their ego got in the way. So many of those moments that actually trip us up. So this process was not easy. I'm not going to lie. If you get told by somebody you could write a book in 90 days, I'm going to tell you, sure, you could, but it would be a very surface level thing. And a waste of your time. And it would just leave you spinning on that hamster wheel of perceived success instead of true internalized success and accomplishment that we are all actually searching for. So if you want to try this, I will recommend every single time, don't go it alone. Do it with the right kind of
parenting. Don't go it alone.
Don't go it alone. Do it with the right kind of supports. Every human needs a support process. Every human needs it. Whether Maddie's the right person for you or somebody else, do it with the kind of guidance that feels true to who you are. And you'll finally be able to walk around those walls or smash right through them when you meet them. Not if you meet them, when you meet them.
When you meet them, without a doubt, every book that we partner with hits it right around 1/3 of the way through. Chapter 3, chapter 4, people call crying. It's just the way it is. It's almost, I used to run marathons, and it's almost like, okay, you burn that runner's fuel off at the beginning, and then the honeymoon's over. It's okay, now the real work begins. And to write a book like you've written a book, and you hit that wall partway through, it means you're doing it right. You should hit that wall, because writing a book, it's you have to dig deep into the why and how and when and what's the transformation that occurs. So many authors begin thinking, I'm writing a book for myself. No, you're writing a book for a reader, your ideal reader, to have that transformation. So by the end of the book, they understand where they are. And you, with your book, the way your chapters were structured, your stories were structured, everything was told, your reader arrives at the end. And I truly hope you go on and do an audiobook with this, maybe with David.
I did. So everybody should know this. I did do an audiobook. It should be out within a month or two.
So you want to give a shout out to David?
Yes. My lovely friend, David Goldberg, who owns Edge Studio. And he is such a phenomenal human. And we met through a lot of other forces, the same as you, through our Jimbra experience of cracking the rich code. And David and I just clicked together. We clicked from a place of communication, from a place of speaking, the public and professional speaking world. And then when I was like, okay, my publisher, they have the option for me to do the audiobook through them. And I said, well, I have a good friend who owns Edge Studio. I'd love to talk to him about it. And I talked to him, and it turns out that my publisher uses David's studio to do their recordings. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. And David's like, Rona, of course. And I'm like, I love you. I adore you. And so I went into the studio, and I have to tell you, the growth and expansion I experienced narrating my own book, gosh, that was incredible. It was absolutely wondrous. And David said, it's really funny. A lot of people will either love it or hate it, and they'll never want to do it. I'm like, oh, I want to do it again and again and again. That was so magical. It gave me the opportunity to play with my voice, which I teach my speakers all the time. Play with your voice. It's this beautiful, magical instrument that you can provide so much emotion to your audience with so much experience, because it's not one-dimensional. It is this beautiful four-dimensional experience for people. And so that narration experience was just magical. And I truly, truly loved it so much. And I have so many people who are already like, do you have an audio version? Do you have an audio? And I'm like, yes, it's coming. So please be on the lookout for that. I will launch it to everybody when it releases.
So that's David Goldberg, Edge Studio in New York. He's one of New York's top audio studios.
He is. He actually has a multitude of different studios all over. But yes, New York is his primary location. And it was great because I live in New Jersey. So it was just let me just take the public transit. I'll just go into the studio. And it was a good 22 hours of recording, including the time I had to go back twice to do fixes and corrections. And it was quite an experience. And I loved it.
So your printed book launches today.
Yes.
Which is the 28th of April, 2026. Yes. So go get that. Unspoken Signals, Essential Parenting Skills to Raise Emotionally Secure Children. The audiobook is coming out soon. Mm-hmm. One thing your listeners might not know is research shows that approximately 48% of the people purchase a handheld book where you just turn the pages, and like pretty darn close, 47 purchase the audio, and then 52% purchase both because they want the whole thing. And so they binge on the audio, which I'm really glad you did your audio, because it's really important to, people get to know you and your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
The Evolution of Parenting.
Evolution of Parenting. So we get to really binge on who you, and now we have the book coming. Yep. All right, we have just a couple minutes left. What are the trials and tribulations that people don't see when writing a book?
Oh gosh, the balance. Truthfully, actually, there's a couple of different things. One is the balance between writing, being present as a partner and a mother, being an entrepreneur, juggling a million balls, or even if you're a daily, a career-driven person and you have your daily day job and then you're trying to write, and still finding time to enjoy the gift of my life. Putting all of that together to me meant taking the time that I needed to do it, and taking the time for some people is scary because they're like, but what if I don't get it done? I don't think that's the point. I think the journey is the point. So the trial and tribulation is honestly fighting your desire to just get it done with the balance of making sure that your life is staying in tune and in balance. There's also that emotional labor, revisiting the old wounds and the old patterns, those moments of remembrance that were sometimes really painful to relive. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I cried. I cried a lot, especially when I was writing a part about my brother who passed. And most people know he wasn't my brother by blood, but he was my brother in every way that counted. And then these other times that felt like a weight was lifting off of my shoulders. So it was like there was an emotional labor that came with that came with the ups and the downs of that. And then, of course, the hardest part is the discipline of maintenance and sustainability of showing up even when the inspiration just simply, it wasn't there. Because the hardest part is rarely the beginning, and it's rarely the end. It's all the middle part that you're kind of going like, when the shiny objects and and other projects and other tasks and to-dos, they pull us away. It's trying to find, how do I sustain this? How do I sustain this in moments where it feels like drudgery? So that was really hard. I would say a lot of people don't realize that because they see the end product and they don't see all that comes on the journey itself.
It takes about 250 to 350 hours minimum for me to write. How did finding a book coach help you?
Oh my gosh. When David introduced me to you, I was like, oh, right. And what's so interesting is that I had met a couple other people who called themselves book coaches, or, that they would help me in the book writing process and things like that. But there was something in finding you that I realized you genuinely spoke to me. You understood what it meant to dive into that depth of the process in a very, I would say, organic way, in a very true to myself way. And so that finding the ability to, okay, this is the support person for me, meant that I could identify that what was good for me. It was that moment where I was like, okay, I think I can breathe a little bit. It was so finding you meant, great, I get to breathe because someone else is able to hand me a little bit of the oxygen that I need to sustain this path that I'm on. Yeah.
Thank you. And it goes again back to that we're not meant to do this alone, whether it's parenting, audiobooks, book writing, life. Yeah. It's having that human connection that we also need and desire.
Yes.
How can people get your book?
It's on Amazon. So easiest way to do it is to jump over to Amazon. My website is also, my assistant was literally in the midst of relaunching both my websites. I have two websites. YaronaBoster.com is the easiest way because it's linked to my footprintscoaching.org website. My footprintscoaching.org website is the main one for my parenting work and loss work that I do with people. And so that's where my book will primarily live, but you can pull it up through any of those. And then it's also on all the major, Barnes and Noble will have it, and, the major retailers will all have it, but Amazon tends to be the easiest way for most people.
The title one more time.
Unspoken Signals, Essential Parenting Skills to Raise Emotionally Secure Children.
And your closing reflection. Final thoughts.
Parenting is not about perfection. It's simply about presence. In fact, being a human is simply about presence. And that means you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to stay open and be willing to learn. And honestly, growth is possible at any moment, most especially as a parent and a human. As long as you're here, you're still growing.
Thank you, Yorona.
Thank you, Maddie.